Well, it is good to be in worship with you today, whether you're with us on campus or online. We're just so thankful that you would join us in lifting up Jesus Christ as Savior for the lost, as Lord of the church, and as reconciler for the entire world. We're in the early stages of a series called The Jesus Road. The series comes out of encounters that Jesus had as he walked a road that led to Jerusalem. The stories are recorded in Luke's gospel in the 9th and 10th and a few other chapters afterwards. The general idea is this: Jesus understands what's waiting for him in Jerusalem. He understands that when he gets there, he's going to be arrested, he's going to be beaten, he's going to be tried, and he understands that he's going to be crucified. And yet, even though he knows what's waiting for him there, he has set his face, is the phrase that Luke uses to talk about his determination. He set his face to head toward Jerusalem, knowing what was waiting for him there. But along the way, he keeps encountering people. He keeps encountering people who have questions or who have situations in their life. And for this series, what we're doing is we're looking at the stories of the people that he encountered, and we're trying to understand what it means to actually walk on that Jesus road in the 21st century. Not that we're taking a Holy Land trip or anything like that, but instead we are understanding that the Jesus road is a road that connects us to him and shows us what he really values. And this morning, we come to a story that in fact, I'm gonna go ahead and ask you for a show of hands if you've heard this story, okay? I mean, this, for those of you who are new around here, we participate every once in a while, all right? Not as often as the pastor would like, but we do, all right? So here's what I'm gonna ask you. If you've ever heard the story, you ready? The story of the Good Samaritan. You raise your hand? You know that story? Okay, all right. So for those of you who think you know it, just go ahead and go to sleep, all right? No, really, you don't, all right? Because there's parts to it. There's a leveling of this story that we miss. First of all, you may know that the story of the Good Samaritan, it's in Luke's gospel in the 10th chapter, in the last few verses. And what happens is that Jesus, as he's going along this road to Jerusalem, he goes to a place called Jericho. And as he's there on the long side of the road, occasionally they would stop and he would teach and do things, miracles and stuff in people's lives. And one day when he's teaching, people are kind of sitting along the side of the road and he's teaching. This young religious lawyer. Now you have to understand, he's not like a lawyer in the 21st century who knows all the civil rules and the laws and that. No, this is a guy who has studied all the Old Testament laws, okay? He spent his life studying the Old Testament. And he is one that people go to for answers about what does the Bible say about this, all right? Only they didn't call it the Bible, they would call it the Torah. What does the Torah say? And so he is supposed to have all the answers. But he's hearing this Jewish rabbi, carpenter from Nazareth, who's never been to synagogue school, he doesn't know any of the people that this guy knows. I mean, and so he's going to test Jesus. And literally, that's the word that Luke uses, that this young religious lawyer stood to test Jesus. And so he says to Jesus, Jesus, what must I do to have eternal life? And Jesus says, well, it's really pretty simple, and you know it because you study the Torah. You are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. And the young man's like, yeah, I've done that. And Jesus is like, good, you got it. And then the guy says, but wait a minute, got another question. Who is my neighbor? Now, what he's wanting with this whole thing, first of all, he's going to test Jesus, see if Jesus gives the right answer. But what he's really seeking is a way of life in which somebody gives you all the rules and you check off the list, and when you finish checking off the last box on the list, you say, I'm good. I'm going to heaven. But Jesus doesn't give him that list. What Jesus does is Jesus says, you know what? One time there was a man, and he was walking this very road that we're walking on. And between Jerusalem and Jericho, you know, and he's talking to people who are from the area, right? And he's like, y'all know that this is a tough road. There are parts of this road that actually go through twists and turns and ups. And in fact, geologists will tell you that the road from Jericho to Jerusalem actually elevated as a 17-mile walk, 17-mile road. And the elevation rose 3,000 feet over 17 miles. So it's just kind of gradual climb up. But along the way, there are cliffs and twists and turns. So that it was a road where robbers and bandits frequented, because they could rob the people who were pilgrims going up to Jerusalem. Now, why would they rob them? Well, they're on their way to church, y'all. They're on their way, and they've got their offerings. And so this was in these places where they could hide and come out and steal from them and then go away. It just, you know, that was an easy mark for them. And so Jesus says there was a man, Jewish man, and he's walking this road. And a group of bandits come on him. And they beat him. They beat him till he's half dead. And he's laying on the side of the road. And then a priest comes by. He's coming, we don't know if he's coming from or going to Jerusalem, but what we know is this, that if he's a Jewish priest in the first century, he is not allowed to touch anything that's dead. It would defile him, is the word. It would make him unclean. And so if he's coming from the temple, maybe he's had a wonderful experience and he wants to get back home and he doesn't want to be defiled by anything where he'd have to go through all these rituals. Or maybe he's already been through the rituals and he's on his way to the city. We don't know which way he was going, but what we know is this. When he saw the guy half dead on the side of the road, he had to choose between his religion and compassion. And he chose religion. And he went by on the other side of the road. Well, then shortly after that, another man came by. And this guy, he's not a priest, but he's what's called a Levite. He's a assistant in the temple. He's a layman, but he works for God a lot in the temple, right? He serves a lot. And as he comes by, he sees the same guy laying there half dead, stripped naked, beaten. And this guy, unlike the priest who's like, I know I can't go over there, this guy, the Levite, he kind of gets halfway in the road and kind of looks over. And the guy's laying there. But then again, it clicks on him. If I touch him, I'm going to be defiled. I can't figure out if he's dead or alive from looking at him, but I can't touch him because that's against the rules. And so he walks on. Now, at this point in time, as Jesus is telling the story, all of these people listening and the young religious lawyer are expecting Jesus to then bring the punchline out and say, but there's a third man who comes by. And he loves God, and he loves God more than the religious people, and he loves God more than the layman and the priest and all the establishment. He's a good Jewish man, and because that's the way the stories went in the first century when you told them to the other Jewish people. It's like lifting up the average Joe, right? But Jesus flips the script on them. Because what Jesus says is, there was a third guy who comes by. And they all look at him like, okay, all right, we're going to stick it to the man right here. Okay. And Jesus says, and he was a Samaritan. Now, unless you lived in the first century, unless you studied the culture, you can't imagine. I'm telling you, there was a gasp when he said it. There was this, no, man, not a Samaritan. Because you have to understand, the Samaritans and the Jews, it wasn't just that they argued about religion or had dialogue about different viewpoints on stuff. No. These people hated each other. They hated each other. And Jesus is telling them that when a Jewish priest and a Jewish Levite passed by a Jewish man on the side of the road because they were afraid they might be defiled by him, and then he says, a Samaritan stopped? I mean, everybody's paying attention now. Everybody's going, what in the world? And then Jesus says the unthinkable. He goes, the Samaritan gets off his donkey and he goes over and he checks on the guy. Because what he sees is another human being. It doesn't matter to him if he's Jewish, Samaritan. He wouldn't have cared if he was an Egyptian or even a Roman. He's another human being. And he's laying there. And he's half dead. And he's beaten. He's stripped naked. And so the Samaritan reaches into the bags on his donkey and he pulls out some olive oil. And he pulls out some bandages. And he pulls out some wine. And he uses the wine because of the alcohol content in the wine. It would have been used in the first century as a disinfectant. And so he wipes the wounds. He pours the oil on them because the medicinal purposes of the oil were to bring healing into the body. They were often used that way. And so here's this Samaritan who is now giving oil and wine and help to a Jewish man. And then, once he gets the man all bandaged up, he puts him up on his donkey. And he begins to walk. Because the man had one donkey. And if he put him up on the donkey, then that means he had to walk. And so he walks the donkey and the man on into town to an inn. And there he stays for a couple of days and he takes care of the man, he bandages the man, he lets the man get to a place where he can kind of take care of himself. And then he goes to the innkeeper and he says, listen, you know me, I come through here a lot. And so I just want you to know that here's 2 silver coins. Now, historians and theologians are kind of debating about how much that 2 silver coins was really worth. Some would say it was worth 2 months. Some would say it was worth 1 month. Either way, it was a long-term commitment. And he says to the innkeeper, listen, whatever he needs, you take care. If this doesn't cover it, you know I'll be back through here. I will make good on it. I'll cover the cost. Just get this man well. So then Jesus turns to the lawyer. And he says to the lawyer, which of these guys, Levite, priest, Samaritan, which one of them was neighbor to the man on the side of the road? And of course, we all know the story, right? Y'all raised your hands. But see, here's the part of the story I don't think you have heard that much. You see, what you've heard is what I've just told you. But what you most likely have missed is this dialogue. Because we tell the story and then say, and we need to go help the people on the side of the road. You know, but listen, there's a reason we help the people on the side of the road. And there's a reason Jesus told this story. And what Jesus did was he looks at the guy and said, okay, you asked me who your neighbor was. I'm asking you, which one of these 3 guys was neighbor? And did you ever hear the answer? Did you ever think about the answer? Here's the answer that he gives. He says, I think it was the man who showed him mercy. Whoa. Time out. He didn't say the man who bandaged him up and paid for it. You know, he said the man who showed him mercy. Now, what in the world is mercy? Well, see, mercy is what when you have power over someone or you have position over someone and you have the right to tell them what to do or you have the power to coerce them into something and you choose not to do that. To give up your rights to give up your viewpoint, to give up your position in order to help someone else. That is mercy, and that is what God lives in. Yes, God is a just God. Yes, God is a God who's righteous. But Jesus proved to us by his own burial and resurrection, by his own sense of setting his face toward Jerusalem, Jesus proves to us that God is, of all things, God is mercy. So what Jesus is telling to this young lawyer is, hey, look, it's not about the religious guy. It's not even about the religious layman. No, it's about the guy you hate, the guy you despise, the guy you would dispose of if you could. He actually knew who his neighbor was. And the lawyer gives us the clue of how we find healing on the Jesus road. Because on the Jesus road, it's about mercy. On the Jesus road, we learn about mercy. You see, the Jesus road leads us to healing that only comes from mercy. The man had been beaten up. The man that Jesus talked about when he said to the young lawyer who wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Jesus replied to him with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho. He was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes and beat him up and left him half dead on the side of the road. Jesus says, listen, you want to know who your neighbor is? Look for the person. Look for the people group. Look for the neighbor that life has beaten up. And life has left them half dead. And to that person, don't answer with all your religious rules. Don't answer with all of your fears. Don't answer with all of your situations. No. Answer by seeing them as human beings. Because you see, the reason the Samaritan got off the donkey, the reason the Samaritan was neighbor to the man beaten, the Jewish man beaten, was because he had encountered mercy. Mercy that begins with compassion. Compassion for everyone. Even the people groups that people tell you to hate, even the ones who speak differently than you, even the ones who have a different opinion. See, that's the problem. We're living in a polarized society right now where everybody's got a position. I have a friend and pastors in northern Indiana. He's been a pastor of the same church for 21 years. And he and I were talking this week, and he was talking about the fact that he finally, a few weeks ago, he said, Kerry, I just had to get up and stand before my people, and I had to say, you know what? So I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm not going to tell you what political party to be a part of. But because I don't do that, there are so many people who send me emails and text messages, and some of them stop by the office to tell me who I should be for. Finally, I just had to stand up and say to our people, I'm for Jesus. I'm for him. And I'm for loving people because Jesus loved people. You see, when that Samaritan who had every right, you see, the Levite and the priest, this young lawyer would have known there are scriptures in the Old Testament that they had vowed to say that they would obey those scriptures that would have required them to go across and help the guy. Yes, there were other scriptures that said, oh, you'll defile yourself, but there were some that made exceptions and said, no, you could, but they didn't remember those. They just remembered the ones that were about themselves. See, mercy begins with compassion, and healing comes from mercy. My wife and I are blessed with 2 granddaughters. They are 3 and 5. And I don't care about your grandkids. Mine are the best in the world, just to let you know. And these 2 little girls are awesome, and we love them with all of our heart. But their parents, our kids, just took a 10-day trip for their second honeymoon. Guess who got to have the 3-year-old and 5-year-old in their house for 10 days? Y'all pray for my kids. Those grandchildren are spoiled rotten right now. All right? But along the way, in the last 10 days, I've been reminded of something that I already knew. And that is that when you're 3 and 5, the world is all about you. Thank you very much. And if you can't figure something out, what do? You yell until you can get Mimi or G-Paw or Mom or Dad to come and fix it for you. And that's the way the world's supposed to be when you're 3 and 5. It's not the way it's supposed to be when you're 35 or 65 or 75 or 85 or, by the grace of God, 95. You see, mercy begins with compassion, and compassion begins with understanding the world's not all about you. There are other people in the world. And so your needs and what you want have to actually interface with the needs of other people and what they want. And that's what happened for the Samaritan. He saw this guy laying on the side of the road, half dead, and he begins to realize, you know what? I travel this road all the time. The same people who did that to him could do that to me. And so what I need to do is I need to get off my horse. I need to get off my donkey and help. Look at the way Jesus put it. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed by him. A temple assistant, the Levite, walked over and looked at him. Can you imagine being the guy laying there on the side of the road, and you see a priest coming by in his garments, and you think, oh, great, here comes help. And he just keeps going. And then a few minutes later, maybe a few hours later, you're trying to struggle for life, and you look up and you see a Levite coming by, a temple assistant, and you think, oh, good. And then he starts stepping towards you just a little bit, right? He's coming towards you, and you're like, oh, great, he's coming over. And then he stops, and he walks away. If you're the guy laying on the side of the road, what's your opinion of church? What's your opinion of temple? What's your opinion of Jewish people? Now, he's a Jewish man, but he's sitting there going, oh, man. And then he hears a donkey. The clip-clop of the donkey's hooves on the cobblestone of the dirt road. And he opens his eyes and he sees a Samaritan. He's like, I'm going to die. There's no way that guy's going to help me. I mean, we don't believe alike. We don't talk alike. We don't look alike. I'm dead. And then, miracle of miracles, the donkey stops. And the Samaritan gets off the donkey. And he takes a few steps toward, and the guy laying there has got to be saying, you know what? When he sees how bad I am, when he sees that I'm Jewish, when he sees that I'm a mess, he's going to turn and walk away. But he just keeps coming. See, I think there's some people in our world right now who have looked at church people and religious people and all the publications and the Christian radio stations and all the Christian stuff, and they're laying on the side of the road, and emotionally and health-wise and mental health and everything, and they're sitting there and they're half dead. And at first they look up and they see church people and they're like, oh, good. And the church people just keep going. And then they look at some people who, well, maybe they don't go to church, but boy, they sure listen to Christian radio all the time. And they just keep going. And they're waiting for somebody. Because you see, when he passed by on the other side, I love the way Luke records this. Then a despised Samaritan came along. And when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. See, mercy starts with compassion. And from that compassion, mercy creates action. It wasn't the goodness of that man's heart that made him get off a donkey and go across. No, it was the realization that the world is not all about me, and there's somebody else in the world, and that somebody else is broken, and that somebody else is hurting, and I need to take what I have. I've got oil here, I've got wine here, I've got bandages here. I travel this road a lot. I know this is a dangerous spot. I know that even while I'm taking care of him, and do you know, the Samaritan could have been thinking, hey, it could have been a trick. How do I know if I get off and help this guy, somebody else isn't going to come by and rob me and beat me? Those bandits may not have completely left here, but because he felt compassion, mercy that begins with compassion always creates action. See, it's not enough for us to say, go your way, live in peace, if we aren't willing to view the other person as just as good as we are and just as worthy of our love and our help and our action. Luke records it like this. Going over to him, the Samaritan, I love this New Living Translation, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and he took him to an inn where he took care of him. That's what I told you about a few minutes ago. That mercy that grows out of compassion, it creates a mercy that always takes action. And then the story gets even crazier. Because you see, the mercy that begins with compassion and creates action, friends, it creates a commitment. It provides not just a knee-jerk response. It's a commitment to long-term healing. The only way I can think of to put it for you is like this. Do you know those television commercials that come on for world hunger, or even the ones that come on for the abuse of animals and all that? Very valid, but they're designed to evoke an emotional response for you. You know, the TV commercials that make you cry, okay? If you've got little kids who are sick, or they've got, all of that, and they're designed, what? To play on your emotion. And that's not a bad thing. We should be emotional about it. This man was moved by compassion, right? But here's the deal. How many of you, now do not raise your hand now, all right? But how many of you have ever just switched the channel when one of those things came on because you just didn't want to watch it? How many of us have just gone the other direction when we've seen the human pain? Now, I'm not talking about the people who are taking advantage of other people. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people who have real pain, who are half dead. And they are in our path. And they were made for more than that. Just like you were made for more than the way we're living. And so that mercy provides not just an emotional response, because emotions change. But the mercy that comes out of compassion, and the mercy that creates action, that kind of mercy, the kind of mercy that's here, that mercy in the story is a commitment to long-term healing. That's why the story goes. The next day he handed the innkeeper the 2 silver coins I was telling you about earlier, telling him, take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. So here's the best part of this whole story. This is actually why I've been talking to you all this time. Because here's the part of the story that we often forget. We stop right here. We stop right here. But the story doesn't stop here. When Jesus finishes telling the story, he looks at the young lawyer who came and asked him originally, what must I do to have eternal life? And then said, who is my neighbor? And here's what Jesus does. Jesus looks at him and puts it back in his court. He puts the ball back in his court, and he says this, So which one of these three guys was neighbor to the man on the side of the road? And for years, I've read this story, I've preached this story, I've taught this story, I've translated from the Greek parts of this story. And it didn't hit me until this week. The most important part of this story is the lawyer's response. Because the lawyer, when Jesus puts him on the spot and says, which one of the three men was neighbor to the man on the side of the road? He says, the man who showed him mercy. See, the story isn't designed by Jesus to guilt anybody. It's not designed by Jesus to evoke our emotional temporary responses. No, this story is designed by Jesus to show us that the way of healing is the way of mercy, and that on the road with Jesus, we're going to run into some people who are hurt and half dead. And if we're followers of Christ, if we're followers of Jesus, then the way we've got to look at it is, how in the world can we be a part of a long-term solution to help those who are broken and half dead be restored? How can we take our resources and we take our donkeys and we put the broken people on the donkey and we take them to the inn and we hang with them long enough for them to get on their feet again, and then we make a provision for them so that they can go on with their life? We inspire them, we help them, we nurture them, we disciple them. See, being a Christian isn't just about what you get. Being a Christian is about, well, the same thing my granddaughters are having to learn. The world's not all about you. We give them grace because they're 3 and 5. But you know what we also have to learn? We got some 35s, some 45s, some 55s, all of those that I just mentioned earlier, who are still saying, Jesus, it's all about me. And Jesus says, whose neighbor? And the man answered rightly, the one who shows mercy. And then here's the actual best part of the whole story. It's the end of the story. Because Jesus then says to the man, you're right. It was the Samaritan who showed mercy. So you go and do the same. When that man woke up that morning, he never dreamed that a Jewish rabbi from a little town called Nazareth would have the audacity to tell him that the way he ought to live to honor God was to do the same thing as a Samaritan. But that's exactly what Jesus told him. Why? Because the Samaritan felt compassion, and the compassion created action, and the action developed a long-term commitment to healing. This morning, my prayer for you, my prayer for me, my prayer for this church, and my prayer for our community is that we would be people who understand mercy, and that we would be people in whom mercy creates a long-term commitment to healing. So, as we wrap this service up today, for those of you on campus, I'm going to ask you, would you stand with us? And in the Old Testament, there's a process in which the prophets talk about sometimes the angels, sometimes God himself singing over his people. And some of the songs that the angels sing become the songs that the people sing. So this morning, as we close, what I want to ask you to do is to allow Sarah, I think I just called you an angel, I don't know that you are, but I think I just called you an angel, Sarah.
Not good.
But I want to ask you to let Sarah sing these words over you. And then if you know them, then if they resonate in your heart, then you sing them too. Because these are the words of the people of mercy. These are the words of the people on the Jesus road. And I invite you today to get off your donkey, take whatever it is you got, and walk with Jesus. And whenever you see somebody half dead and broken, take what you got, find a way to be mercy to them. Let's sing together.